Hey, what is up mortals? Tim here. And before we get into today's video, there is something I'd like to say. I'd like to let you all know that we have a merch store. Some of the items in it are only available for a limited amount of time. So, if you're interested, go into the description and check it out. Each purchase helps us make more content. Secondly, if this video hits 300 likes by the end of the week, we will continue this What If. Thirdly, if you didn't know, only 41.3 of you guys are subscribed to us. So please, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. Mock battles had proven to be an essential resource for not only Bakugou, but the entirety of Class 1A. Some teams triumphed, others failed, but every single student learned a lesson from the ordeal, be it organization, communication, confidence, or the fact that there may be room to improve in regards to their quirks. The air in the classroom was a contrasting fusion of disappointment and contentment. The blonde youth took this alone time to reflect. Had he been as effective as he could have been? What was there to improve upon? He tried to approach the situation as objectively as possible, but the overwhelming urge flooding his body encouraged him to shout and cheer. Bakugou had proven himself. His contemporaries knew what he was capable of now more than ever. If they wanted to underestimate him now, then they were in the minority. The young man let a satisfied smirk split his lips. Dude, what you pulled off was so manly. You're really badass. A boisterous shout exploded from behind Bakugou as he started toward the exit of the schoolyard. He turned to see one of his classmates, a wild-eyed and crimson-haired young man with a pointed, toothy grin adorning his face. I'm Kirishima. You're Bakugou, right? Yeah. Bakugou delivered a side-eyed glance over his shoulder before continuing on his journey home. He had to catch up with Midoriya. This guy was energetic, he thought. You really beat the hell out of these two, man. It was brutal. Before the young man had a chance to respond, Kirishima had flanked his right and wrapped an arm around his shoulder. The atomic blonde wasted no time rolling the hand off of him. Where'd you learn to fight like that? Kirishima questioned, unfazed by his new friend's cold exterior. Just practiced. Did you want anything? He seemed unamused with the spiky-haired boy's machismo. Just wanted to get to know you, dude. You're manly as hell. See you in class tomorrow? He apparently had to split off and go another way. Bakugou presented his usual scowl, but the compliment was encouraging. Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. Before he knew it, a week had passed, and the class had settled into its usual day-to-day grind. It even had a class representative in the form of Tenya Ida, much to the atomic blonde's chagrin. He wasn't pleased about his newfound rival being chosen to be his representative, but there wasn't much he could do about it. Bakugou didn't want to be involved in the politics of it all anyways. It seemed boring. What today had to provide was far more intriguing though. Class 1A! Make sure to line up in an alphabetical order so we can board the bus in the most efficient way possible, Ida exclaimed, gesticulating rapidly with an arrow-straight arm. Most of the class ignored him and piled on haphazardly, much to his annoyance. Thankfully, the open-faced layout of the transport encouraged such a casual entrance. Bakugou settled into his seat. With Uraraka and Midoriya sliding in next to him, Kirishima wasted no time sitting across from him as well. Unbeknownst to the boy, he had grown quite popular with the rest of the students. Not only did he present an indomitable will, but his skills backed up his unrestrained demeanor in full. The last to enter the bus was none other than Aizawa, their homeroom teacher. As you know, you'll all be participating in a simulated active rescue environment. The staff believes it to be rational that the students learn this early. Don't disappoint us, he grumbled, his tone low and uninspired. His demeanor was akin to that of a world-weary public servant, nothing remotely similar to what is usual for an educator. He settled into his seat towards the front, almost immediately dozing off into a precarious sleep. All right, Kirishima started, eagerly glancing around the confines of the vehicle. Nobody gonna mention the elephant in the room? Some of the students gave him a confused stare. What did he mean? This guy is something else, he pointed at Bakugou, who immediately rolled his eyes. Was he going to start his spiel all over again?
Honestly, I agree,
someone called out. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and found Momo Yaoyorozu. With the bright young lady being their deputy representative, the statement was certainly a surprise, especially since she had entered the course via a recommendation.
Watching him dispose of the opposition without so much as breaking a sweat was impressive. It actually had me worried.
Bakugou was awed to find that some of the other students agreed. He had spent so many years building his body and his skill set to compete, and now, top-level students were intimidated by him? He scoffed at it. But this is precisely what he wanted, to prove himself. Good, he spat. The entire class looked his way. Goes to show that I don't need some stupid power to compete. I'll make sure to keep every last one of you on your damn toes. It was aggressive, sure, but most of the course took it as a challenge. They saw him as an equal. He delivered the message to all of his classmates, but his eyes were glued on one person, Todoroki. The rest of his fellow students reacted to what he had said. They encouraged the notion of competition, and even seemed a bit fearful to ever face him. The split-haired boy seemed utterly underwhelmed by it all. His eyes kept their usual dull texture, unfazed, unperturbed, unintimidated. It caused Bakugou to scowl. The blonde refused to admit it to himself, but both he and Todoroki were aware of one fact. If they were to fight, the quirkless boy didn't stand a chance. It wouldn't be a Pyrrhic victory on the dual-quirked boy's part either. It wouldn't be close. It would be an uneventful massacre. As much as it was a blow to his otherwise bolstered ego, Bakugou had to focus. Distractions like fear, trepidation, or a sense of inferiority simply weren't in the picture. They couldn't be. The young man wasn't just going to participate. He wasn't just going to compete. He was going to triumph. Even if he failed to achieve victory the first time, he'd lift his sorry carcass off the asphalt and try again. Adversity was only a temporary concern. To prevail was a permanent achievement. Finally, 1A arrived at the USJ facility. It was a towering megalith of a dome, constructed of reinforced concrete and other materials meant to be virtually impervious to anything the students could throw at it. Not that it mattered though, since its entire purpose was to allow the pupils of UA High School to cut their teeth in the rescue practice. Of course, not every hero chose this career path, but emergencies had no interest in what a hero's preferred profession was. If they were on the scene of a natural disaster, they had to act. It was the duty of a hero. As they entered the facility, they found it to be far more spacious and complex than they had initially expected. From a platform at the crest of the grounds, the students bore witness to several microcosms within the walls of the premises. 1A also had a chance to meet a new tutor in the form of 13, a rescue-oriented hero with a deceptively powerful ability.
Hello!
She introduced herself. The woman was adorned in what was reminiscent of an astronaut's attire. Her tone was also far more energetic than their own teachers.
Welcome to USJ, the Unforeseen Simulation Joint. I assume you all have been informed about what we'll be doing today, so I'll make this brief.
Before she could continue, the air within the interior altered to something far more malicious. A swirling, Stygian vortex ripped the very fabric of space around it as it opened. A gaping maw of evil from which an army of villains exited from. At first, the students were confused. Wasn't this supposed to be a rescue simulation? Midoriya questioned. Uraraka looked over to him and Bakugou, a fearful expression contorting her face. Aizawa was quick to lift his goggles over his shaded irises. This isn't part of the class. Everyone stay back. He instinctively extended his arm outwards, gesturing for the class to stick where they were. That wasn't terribly hard, however, since over half of them already found themselves petrified at his words. 13, keep the kids safe. I'll take care of them. Aizawa glared down at the pack of miscreants, taking stock of the number and potential abilities they possessed. Bakugou took a step forward, reaching out for his teacher. Let us help! You can't take out all these bastards yourself! Eraserhead didn't so much as look back at his pupil, instead launching himself from the top of the staircase down towards the opponents. You don't become a pro with only one trick, kid, he growled. The first battery of opponents were armed with ranged quirks. They were quick to take offensive positions and aim up at their newfound target, though as soon as they went to fire upon him, they discovered a terrifying fact. Their quirks were disabled. Before they even had so much as a chance to respond to this, Aizawa was upon them like a ravenous dog. He made fantastic use of his binding cloth, shooting the reinforced material out like tendrils to quickly dispatch the fiends. Using the largest as an impromptu bludgeon, Aizawa knocked the remainder aside with dexterity and power. A young man adorned in a suit of severed arms took note of this. All Might was supposed to be here, he hissed. His voice was raspy and forced. Like he wasn't used to speaking, the man incessantly clawed at his throat. Why isn't he here, Kuragiri? Calm down, Shigaraki. We can still send a message, the void itself replied. Slowly, it coalesced into a single point, taking on the rough, vague estimation of a human silhouette. I want him dead, Kuragiri. I want to kill him. Don't you understand? I need to. His lips quivered with rage. It wasn't going to plan already, and he had just arrived. The creature behind him, a massive behemoth entirely inhuman in appearance, squawked idly. Meanwhile, Eraserhead made quick work of Shigaraki's goons. It took no time at all for the pro to realize that these were no better than low-grade street thugs, barely above petty criminals. The amateurish way in which they approached combat was evidence of that. A four-armed brigand was the next opponent he faced, a threat quick to pounce and throw rapid, unpolished telegraph strikes with no sense of pacing or timing. He seemed confident for some reason. Aizawa scoffed. The hero choked up on his binding cloth and used it as a shield to catch the four-armed man's punch, quickly fastening the fabric around his wrist and using it as a lever to maneuver him around. The dark-eyed professional quickly rotated on one foot, using the momentum to sling the criminal over his shoulder and into the concrete. It splintered from the force, sending a shockwave of cracks across its surface. Aizawa continued without a second thought.
Go get the kids, Kuragiri. Suck them up and spit them out, and see what this pathetic little hero will do then.
Shallow breaths rolled against the dry, splitting lips of Shigaraki. He grew antsier by the second.
I want them to squirm.
Of course, he replied. The billowing incorporeal form of Shigaraki's right-hand man warped and tore and began forming across the battlefield. Midoriya was the first to spot the peculiar black mist appearing from nowhere behind the crowd. With a gesticulated finger, he brought the attention of the rest of the course to it. "Look! I think he has a warp ability! Everyone stay back!" he exclaimed. 13 quickly swept around the perimeter of 1A and sandwiched herself between the villain and the teens. The tips of her gloved hand shot open, revealing the true power of her quirk. His booming voice appeared from everywhere at once, sending a palpable shiver down their collective spines. 13, is it? Step aside. The hero stepped forward in rebellion. This villain wouldn't tell her what to do. Meanwhile, Bakugou had grown tired of acting like a defenseless bystander. "Let's get this bastard," he whispered to Kirishima. The boy agreed with a subtle nod. Without warning, the duo lunged at the mass of swirling black with arms cocked back. He had to have a body, right? Something they could strike within the miasma that was his ability. Kuragiri capitalized on this unforeseen attack by doing exactly what he was ordered to do. His mass swelled to encompass the group, sucking away half the course within his void. The first to go, of course, was Kirishima and Bakugou. The boys had acted recklessly, and now they found themselves away from the rest of their class, the pro heroes, and in the middle of a faux rescue room surrounded by enemies. 13 acted in retaliation by opening the tip of her gloved hand. A whirlwind of force in the form of a vacuum started consuming the rapidly expanding mass of Kuragiri slowly but surely. The scoundrel was taken aback by this ability, though his attitude quickly shifted. He was impressed by the quirk, taking note of the fact that every minuscule particle she consumed was instantly eviscerated. "What a wonderful ability," he declared. "It's a shame that it doesn't do much to me, though." Without much effort, Kuragiri formed a portion of himself behind the woman and allowed her own quirk to disintegrate her suit. The sheer force of the attack almost immediately incapacitated her. As she sunk to the floor, she reached out to the students.
Someone, get help.
She muttered before slipping into unconsciousness. All eyes, even if indistinctly, glued to Ida. He was the best candidate to do so, as he was by far the fastest and most mobile student in the class. They found him entirely in awe of the situation, overwhelmed and weighed down by the perceived importance of this task. Could he do it? He had to. He would, or he would die trying. Ida's engines shot to life as he bolted forward. The boy knew he had to outrun the villain, but was it possible? How fast did this warp ability work? Before he knew it, the villain was working to overwhelm him emphatically. Though to his surprise, Kuragiri's efforts were stifled by the likes of his fellow students. They halted him in every way they could, and after what felt like an eternity of sprinting, the young man finally reached the door. As he strained to yank it open, his classmates continued to fight on his behalf. It was just this final obstacle holding him back. He had to save them. Ida was the only one that could do it. With one final exerting yank, the adolescent wrenched the door ajar and dashed through the opening. Aizawa found himself face to face with the de facto mastermind of this attack, wasting no time when it came to attacking the individual. Their clash was swift and vicious, with Aizawa seemingly getting the upper hand immediately in the form of a brutal elbow to the abdomen. Much to his shock, Shigaraki caught it in his pallid palm. Before he could step away to begin another flurry of attacks, a wave of agony echoed through his elbow, and when he looked down at it, he found the skin splitting and faltering at the man's touch. Eraserhead shoved his opponent back and took a moment to pace himself. His arm wouldn't move, no matter how hard he strained to do so. This guy must have rotted his muscles away too. Looking down at his limp, mangled arm, the pro exhaled. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called Anime Theory. Anime Theory mainly focuses on a large variety of mind-boggling anime theories. If you're interested in content like this, please go check the description below, or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now, with that out of the way, let's get back into the story. The villains weren't in the business of giving Eraserhead room to breathe. They were on him without hesitation, attacking him with the same reckless abandon that the rest of them had. He expertly slipped under their strikes and around their attacks, using his unmatched mobility to his advantage as much as he could. Even still, his binding agent was of much use without both arms. A wave of uncertainty flooded his brain before a ragged, high-pitched squawk erupted from behind him. Aizawa turned to see that inhuman behemoth once more, its massive hand wrapped around his skull before he could react, slamming his body into the concrete with a visceral crack. His goggles splintered on contact, as did his bones. He gagged and heaved from the impact. The monster didn't stop. Bakugou and Kirishima had made quick work of their sector, finding their way back to the main facility in no time. The first thing they laid eyes on was their fellow classmates, Tsuyu and Midoriya, chest deep in a pool of water. Kirishima approached them with haste, though the duo quickly became privy to the fact that their eyes were glued onto something, and that their gaze was clouded with a palpable terror. Bakugou was the first to look in the direction they were, with Kirishima immediately following. They found their teacher, Aizawa, dangling limply from the vice-like grip of what the hand-ornamented man kept referring to as Nomu. With every rasping, haggard breath that pressed through his teeth, a torrent of crimson followed in pursuit. Nomu used the man's arm as a handle to sling him into the floor once more. The sickening sound of bones faltering beneath contorted flesh met the students' ears. Both of the foolhardy boys had witnessed enough of this, but Kirishima was the first to react. Bolstering his skin with his hardening quirk, the boy bolted at the Nomu, poised to strike. "No!" Aizawa screamed, his voice threadbare and taut. "Stay back!" He was cut off by Nomu, chucking him into the floor like a toddler tosses away a toy. The near-dead hero impacted the shattered surface with a sharp thump. Kirishima did land the first blow, a powerful right hook to the abdomen, though it did nothing to the creature. It just squawked, mindlessly in reaction, and proceeded to retaliate with its own right hand. This one aimed for the boy's head. He had no time to react. Nomu was far too fast for him to do so. The blast sent a shockwave through the air. Kirishima's heels carved through concrete as he skidded to a halt, several meters away. One blow, and he was barely even standing. He turned to face the Nomu, staggering and almost buckling to one knee as he did so. The skin that was once hardened on his skull had been flayed from the muscle, leaving a patch of exposed ligaments on the left side of his head. Rivulets of ruby poured from the gaping wound and soaked the left side of his face. Bakugou screamed out for his friend, almost dashing there to provide whatever help he could. That act was quickly stopped in its tracks, as he turned to see Shigaraki darting towards Tsuyu and Midoriya. The teen wasn't privy to his quirk, but he had to stop the villain. Bakugou had no choice. Shigaraki grinned beneath the severed hand as his palm wrapped around the skull of the green-haired frog girl. Though, to his shock and dismay, she didn't begin to dissipate from his touch. He quickly glanced back to see that Aizawa had activated his quirk one more time, and the villain didn't even have time to curse to himself before a massive right hook made contact with his jaw. He was sent reeling from the blow, his hand losing its grasp on the girl in the process. The villain's mask went tumbling to the side, revealing his shriveled face to the open air. He wiped blood from his lip and turned to meet the gaze of a brutally angry Katsuki Bakugou, his arms raised and prepared now more than ever to brawl. "Was that enough? Or do I have to break your goddamn jaw?" he yelled, his voice like daggers to the shocked Shigaraki.
Nomu, get him,
he growled. The creature pounced fast enough to nearly break the sound barrier. It was nothing more than a flash to the teen, a streak of dark rapidly approaching him before it was halted in its tracks by an even more swift mass of color and motion. The monster had been brought to a stop by the symbol of peace himself, All Might. He didn't wear his usual smile. Instead, a grimace adorned his face. He and the beast were secured in place by one another, their fingers interlocked and their heels digging into the ground like jackhammers. "You're scum!" All Might spat. Bakugou had never seen him so livid before. He yanked the creature by its hands into the crown of his head, delivering a massive headbutt to its jaw and loosening its grip on his hands. The hero got to work after that, machine-gunning blows into the creature's abdomen and face without any sense of restraint. His hunger for justice, as well as his anguish for those that he hadn't yet protected, fueled him. Bakugou took a step back and fell to his rear, instinctively rolling out of the way as All Might blasted the creature back with a flurry of blows. The wind pressure from the ordeal threatened to suck everything up into a tornado. It was a hurricane of raw power, a presentation of the peak of humanity versus the absolute worst of what the Hellions could provide. Nomu attempted to act as a counter to the Titan, but it stood no chance. All Might had used his hatred as fuel to far exceed his usual output. People were nearly dead. His pupil was nearly killed, and if he hadn't shown up, then Bakugou very well may be a stain on the floor by the time the hero did. Nothing was going to stand in the way of him defeating this devil. The young man found himself in awe of the overwhelming force his teacher was presenting. Seeing it on television was one thing, but experiencing the ferocity and strength that he displayed in a fight was something to behold. The culmination of it all was the profound and suffocating realization that he was completely out of his realm. He was competent, sure, but if it was him in All Might's situation, or Kirishima's or Aizawa's, he wouldn't have lasted a single strike. He wasn't strong enough. He wasn't durable enough to compete with true strength. The boy looked down at his hands and tightened them. If he wanted to make All Might proud, and if he wanted to keep up, he would have to go even further beyond. If he was satisfied with his strength before, he was a fool for doing so. Bakugou had to deconstruct everything and start anew. Detroit Smash! He shouted out, taking the capabilities of his power to its absolute peak. All Might had already put the creature on the back foot as soon as he had arrived, so this was sure to finish it off. The blast connected with its solar plexus, taking the Birdman off of its feet and sending it careening through the sky. It bashed into the ceiling of the facility, quickly passing through the threshold and bursting out the other side. After that small roadblock, nothing stopped it from spinning and tumbling through the air indefinitely. Nomu had been defeated, and All Might was unscathed. Shigaraki was flustered. His prized possession, the means to All Might's end, had been torn away from him so unceremoniously, he couldn't help but scream. He hurriedly scooped up his mask and placed it back on his face, almost considering an attack at All Might, before turning to see a new crowd forming at the entrance of the facility. Before he could react, white-hot anguish tore through his limbs. 4 bullets had completely disabled him. 4 rounds fired from the pro-hero Snipe. Shigaraki sunk to the floor, attempting in vain to drag himself to safety. Thankfully, the veritable deus ex machina that was Kurogiri was there to warp the young villain away. He had narrowly escaped capture that time, though at great cost. He was a fool. Even with such a powerful tool, he wasn't able to defeat All Might. He glared at the ceiling of the bar, cursing at himself for his failures. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description below. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're just interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video. So thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out mortals, y'all have an amazing day.